everyone, Tera Roberts here with your free agency deep cuts for week 13. Before we get started, be sure to like this video and subscribe to Fantasy Alarm. Now let's go ahead and dive right in at quarterback. If you're looking to stream this week, I would go with Tua Tagovailoa. Miami plays the Giants, who don't really give up a ton of fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, and they are 1 week removed from the demolition of Jalen Hurts. But contrary to popular belief, Tua has actually been a very stable fantasy quarterback this year. In games he's played in full, his lowest fantasy performance was last week with 13.2 fantasy points in a game where Miami easily won without the need of high passing volume. And for 2 weeks in a row now, he's completed more than 80% of his passes. All those stats are to say one thing. I doubt this is going to be a game where he throws for 4 touchdowns, but I think it's a game where he is the safest streaming option, guaranteed to get you a solid 15 to 18 fantasy points. Moving on to running backs, I know fantasy managers who made deep pivots to Tevin Coleman last week were highly disappointed by the fact that the one rushing touchdown went to Austin Walter, but putting that aside, Coleman had 16 carries for 67 yards and caught 2 of 3 targets for 3 yards. Not particularly fantastic performance, but 16 carries is 16 carries. The Jets face Philadelphia, who doesn't really struggle against the run, but has been playing in competitive games over the past couple of weeks. As long as the game can stay within reach and the Jets can commit to the run, Coleman can see volume worthy of being worth a roster. Finding another option at running back this week is tough because many of the guys available on waivers either have a bye or really tough matchups. But if you need an additional pivot, Matt Breida is an option. The Bills face New England, a top 10 defense in both pass and run in DVOA, and Breida isn't exactly seeing high volume with just 9 carries last week, but he is finding the end zone. 3 touchdowns in the past 3 games. If Zach Moss is yet again a healthy scratch, Breida could continue to see increasing opportunities. For wide receiver, I've got 4 options for you, so I'll try to run through them as quickly as possible. Kendrick Warren is still very available on waivers. After a solid week of catching 5 of 6 targets for 61 yards and 2 touchdowns, he didn't really see a big jump in roster percentage. That may be because people are thinking that he'll fail against a very tough Buffalo defense, but that Buffalo defense will look a little bit different this week now that Tre'Davious White is on IR. Believe it or not, Bourne is actually a top 20 receiver in standard format and top 25 in full PPR. And I think even in a tough matchup, he'll still keep his production going and have a solid day. Deandre Carter is another option as well. Over the past 4 games, he's seen a total of 20 targets and had 12 receptions. Modest numbers. But in 3 of those 4 games, he's had a touchdown. Washington plays Las Vegas in a game that could be high scoring, and Carter could pay off in a pinch. Another option is Juwan Jennings. With Deebo Samuel out, Jennings steps up as the wide receiver 2 behind Brandon Ayuk. In limited action last week, Jennings caught 2 of 3 targets for 1 touchdown on just 37% of snaps. Ayuk and Kittle will lead the way, and Elijah Mitchell will be very strong on the ground, but Jennings can fill a void while Deebo is out. And finally, unless your league is the deepest of the deep, Josh Reynolds should still be available on your waivers. Reynolds reunited with Jared Goff, and while it may not be the most exciting combo in the world, it worked, because he caught 3 of 5 targets for 70 yards and 1 touchdown. The Detroit offense isn't exactly something that we're seeking out to invest in, but there's no wide receiver 1 option, and if Reynolds can hold preference with Jared Goff, he can potentially provide some fantasy value. And finally, at tight end, I am picking up Foster Morel. When Foster Moreau stepped in for Darren Waller in Week 7, he had 6 receptions for 60 yards and 1 touchdown, playing 100% of the snaps. And last week, when Waller went down, he did have 5 targets. The tight end position is just so critical within the Raiders' offense. So when Waller goes down, the target share will be there for Morel. He has the opportunity to be productive against Washington. And that wraps things up for this week's Deep Waiver ads. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to Fantasy Alarm, and come back next week for another round of Deep Cuts.